Thanks. Good morning, everyone. My name's Kim Johnson. I'm the chair of the Liverpool City Region APPG and the Labour MP for Liverpool Riverside. And I'd like to welcome everyone to our session today, when we'll be looking at the major impact poor quality housing has on health, the environment, future sustainability and economic prosperity in our communities and places. And we'll look at how other city regions across the country are responding to the housing and cost of living crises, and specifically how more devolved powers and greater accountability over housing could help drive inclusive growth and accelerate place-based regeneration. This discussion today will be framed by the Liverpool City Region Housing Statement, which sets out the region's 5 high-level ambitions and priorities designed to improve the condition of housing across region. And they are delivering more homes, improving housing choice and quality, supporting our ageing population, regenerating our neighbourhoods, improving the quality of renting and tackling homelessness. We have 4 great speakers today. Sue Jarvis, who is the co-director of the Heseltine Institute for Public Policy. Paul Kelly, director, Breaking Ground and accredited community-led homes advisor. Bronwen Rapley, chief executive for Onward Homes, and Joe Harrison, director of environment planning and innovation for United Utilities. So, begin the session, I'd like to ask each of the panel members in turn to speak for 5 minutes on the same question. And after the 4 speakers, there'll be a panel discussion with a Q&A. So the question we're asking today is, what do we need to do now to deliver high quality, healthy and sustainable homes in the Liverpool City region fit for the future? And I'd like to call Bronwen Rapley first to discuss that question. Thank you. Over to you, Bronwen.
Thank you very much, Kim. And I have a short presentation which I'm hoping is going to be able to be shared. There we go. I'm sorry, I can't see it. I'm not sure whether or not it can be shared.
Can Luke or Luke?
I'm just having a few issues. Just give me 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. That's lovely. Well, let me, while we just wait for the tech to follow us, I thought I would start with some good news, because goodness knows we all need it at the moment, don't we? And when we talk about housing, and we talk about the people and the communities that live in our housing as housing associations, we often think about building more homes, and that's really important. But what's really also really important at the moment is how we sustain our customers in their homes, because for people to lose their homes during a crisis like this is such a terrible thing. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about some of the help that we're offering within our communities as housing associations. So very briefly, just a few of the things that we're doing. If we look at, for example, Riverside have a Helping Hand fund of £500,000 for their customers. Onward added 1.2 million to household incomes last year through our financial inclusion work. Colleagues at South Liverpool, Taurus and Halton are offering fuel vouchers, and we've got a school uniform initiative to support customers in the Anfield area from Plus Dane. The kind of work that we do to help people stay in their home, a housing sustainment service, support for those at risk of eviction. There we go, that's fantastic. So if we move us on to slide 4, and we'll share the slides afterwards, so everyone's very welcome to have a look at them. And on to the next one, if you would, please. So the Housing Sustainment Service, which is being run by our colleagues at Riverside to support those at risk of eviction, an advisory service on welfare and mental health. Onward, we've invested 200,000 in a Home Plus fund to provide furniture to customers, and for housing, a Live Well fund. And if you could move on to the next slide, please. And again, further work in terms of resilience, food, examples of community funds being offered by different organisations. And moving on to the next slide, many of you will be familiar with the work that Onward has been doing with Community Shop, creating social supermarkets for low-cost food and essentials. And I just wanted to very quickly kind of run through this, partly because it just emphasises for me the key part that housing associations play and continue to play in our communities, as well as our role in continuing to build new homes. If I may slip on to, if we can slip past the next slide and move to slide 8. I did want to talk about our long-term plans for better homes. You will all be aware that we face challenges with ageing housing. 50% of private sector homes within the city region are pre-World War II and 25% pre-1919. Low energy efficiency and lack of choice are real problems, as well as the absolute need for more homes to be built. But we are facing some really significant challenges in our ambitions to be able to meet this. Cost inflation for new build housing at the moment is running somewhere between 10 and 15%. The cost of borrowing over the last few weeks has risen from our current cost of borrowing at the moment is about 3% to around 6%. Those things make building new homes unviable for most housing associations. And therefore the challenges that we face to maintain the investment that we make in our homes currently, the investment that we make in our communities, and then the ability to build new homes has never been under greater threat. And finally, if we move to the last slide, what would help? Because we're all familiar, I'm sure, with the problems. One of the biggest things that would help us is certainty on rent. Rent is our key source of income. At the moment, the government is consulting on a cap on rent. And whilst we absolutely understand the impact on customers of inflationary rent rises, and none of us would be imposing those, nevertheless, restrictions on our source of income are quite significant given the inflationary pressures that we're facing. So certainty on rent would allow housing associations to attract more public and private investment for improvements to homes. At the moment, the discussions are ranging between no cap, 7%, or a rent freeze. And given the political volatility, it's really difficult to work out exactly where that's going to land. The consequences, I can't stress, I know we at times as a sector, we're inclined to cry wolf, but the consequences really can't be underestimated. We think the second thing that would make a difference is devolution. So we know already that in the search for cuts, the affordable homes budget is under pressure, and devolution of regeneration to the Combined Authority for Place-Based Partnerships, housing associations involved in that, focus on regeneration and dealing with some of the stock that we know needs to be renewed would be really helpful. And I think the final thing is just investment into our local planning authorities. At the moment, it takes us on average 14 months to get planning. By the time that we've started the scheme, inflation has then taken the costs up. We find ourselves in a position where even the schemes that we wanted to build, we're challenged with. So getting investment into local planning authorities will be an important part of enabling us to build those new homes. So it's a whistle-stop tour, but happy to take further questions and so on as we move into the discussion.
Thank you so much, Bronwen, and I really appreciate that you started with positive news and all of the wonderful things that Onward are doing in our most disadvantaged communities. So thanks for that, and highlighting some of the difficulties in moving forward in terms of building new homes, you know, sustainable new homes as well. So thank you. We'll have more discussions about that shortly. I'd now like to bring in Jo Harrison, the Director of Environment, Planning and Innovation information at United Utility. So over to you, Jo. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kim, and hello everybody. Thank you very much for inviting us today. Obviously, we're sort of focusing on the sort of sustainability part of the discussion, so I'll just sort of take a few minutes to talk about two areas from a sort of United Utilities perspective, and really those are around how we can drive water efficiency in homes and better managing surface water around homes. One of my key roles is to really look at how we're going to be resilient to climate change in the long term. And we're really focusing on how we sort of really drive efficient use of water resources in particular. And at the moment, we're obviously focused on the cost of living challenge for customers, and a huge amount of everybody's energy bill is associated with heating water. So we're focusing our sort of community narrative really around sort of save energy by saving water. But we really want to look at how we deliver that in the longer term, and how we encourage developers to install water efficient fixtures and fittings, particularly around taps, showers, baths, etc. In particular, we're focused on looking at how we can work with developers when they're building new houses. And since 2018, we've offered a 90% reduction on the infrastructure charge that developers pay if they can demonstrate that they are delivering a water efficient home. We've got over 90,000 plots across the Northwest, and we've saved developers already £25 million worth of cost associated with that, which has saved around 3.8 million litres of water. But we're really looking at how do we encourage developers to do more. The current building standards are treated as a sort of ceiling of ambition for water efficiency and not a minimum expectation. We really need local authorities to support that sort of approach for water efficiency as we sort of try and roll out the development of new housing across the region. There are also no financial incentives or government support to encourage the use of grey water at the moment, and sort of investigate technologies that use more sort of water efficient devices. So we're really trying to promote that. But we need simple solutions to help customers use less water and to recycle water. We're advocating, along with the rest of the water industry, the need for white goods to be labelled in terms of their water efficiency. And so that's something that is in the Environment Act, and we're really pressing government to be able to promote that further going forward. Also, things like incentives around things like toilet design. So we lose a huge amount of water, and it costs customers a huge amount of money with what we call leaky loos. So the sort of more modern style built-in toilets that often run and don't operate efficiently. So we're looking at how we can get new manufacturers to change their approach in terms of producing things that are much more water efficient. But critically, we really want to roll out metering for customers. It's the way that customers can control their bill. It enables us to be more water efficient in the long term. It enables us to have a better understanding of where water is being used and how it's being used. And it enables us to then utilise sort of modern techniques of artificial intelligence and data analysis in order to understand how we can help customers better in their management of water, identify leaks on their properties, and really drive that long-term water resilience. But it's not just about water efficiency in the home, it's about how we manage surface water. And that's a particular challenge in the Liverpool area, where over 84% of the sewers in the region are combined sewers. So they are sewers that take both surface water and obviously foul water from people's properties. So we are really trying to also encourage developers to look at how that they can reduce the discharge to our sewers. So we're offering, again, that 90% reduction in connection charges and infrastructure charges for developers, and we've seen a great uptake on that across the region as well. But really what we want is to promote sustainable drainage so that no surface water from new developments goes into sewers and adds to the problem that we have about reduced resilience and increased the amount of potential for sewer flooding going forward. So we also have a business market services scheme where we've got SUDS, where SUDS in non-household premises can be affected by a surface water charging ban. So if people in non-household premises reduce the amount of surface water going to sewer, then they also get a refund. But we want to make property level attenuation something that is really rolled out across the city region and across the Northwest. So we're encouraging customers to have water butts, rain gardens, permeable surfaces to prevent surface water getting into the sewerage system. And in particular, we want to encourage DEFRA to consider the implementation of Schedule 3 of the Flood and Water Management Act, which is amending the automatic right to connect surface water into drains, which will have a significant impact and improvement on the way that sewers are operated within the city region.
Thank you so much, Jo. And I think, the point of offering reductions to developers, to put in water efficient services, I think is, a real bonus, and hopefully more will take that up. Thank you. I'm now going to hand over to Sue Jarvis, who is the co-director for the Heseltine Institute for Public Policy. Over to you, Sue. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. What we've done at the Heseltine Institute, I mean, this is a really big question that we've been asked. So we've produced a short research paper ahead of today's meeting, and that will be available on the APPG website after today's meeting. What we're arguing is the nature of the housing challenge for the city region is really driven by low quality housing, with a high proportion of ageing, inefficient housing that's offering insufficient choice for residents. And if we just look at some of the headline facts, Bronwen already flagged up that more than 50% of private sector homes in the city region are pre-World War II, and a quarter of them were built before 1919. If we look at the current energy crisis, we've got a real spotlight on the role of housing in keeping energy use and costs at a manageable level. But within the city region, only 51% of the homes have an energy performance certificate at band C or above, and A is the most efficient. So we talked about energy efficiency at the last APPG, but it's a real one linked to housing. And even before the current energy crisis, the city region had a higher proportion of households living in fuel poverty than the national level, if you look at figures from 2020. So as we know, high energy costs as a proportion of income also can undermine that wider community wealth in an area, and they just increase financial instability in some of our more disadvantaged areas. So we already had a situation before the current energy crisis. And there's a definite need that's been flagged up in all of the key documents about the need to diversify our housing offer, get my teeth in. And in the city region, we have a large number of band A and B council tax properties, and again, higher than the numbers that we've got nationally. And if you look at the distribution of housing, in some areas, we have an undersupply of good one-bedroomed houses. And then in other areas, choice is constrained for higher earners, where there aren't enough of the bigger properties where families may wish to move to. So we've got that imbalance across different parts of the city region. And then for older people, a lot of the existing stock is ill-suited to their needs and doesn't necessarily meet accessibility and adaptability standards. So we've got all of this to contend with. So what does that mean? There are wider implications because of the housing poor quality that impact on poor health and well-being, that impact on environmental sustainability, but also the impact on community stability and that wider barrier to prosperity. So there's lots of reasons why we need to tackle this. And while new homes maybe play a part in addressing some of the housing challenges, if you look at national figures, it's anticipated that the vast majority of the homes that people will live in 2050 already exist today. So that really reinforces the point that we need to make significant improvements to the existing stock of housing. And there's also the climate and net zero challenge that plays into this as well. So one of the arguments, or one of the suggestions in our paper, is to really double down on retrofitting of older properties with insulation and other energy saving measures. Now that's easier said than done, as members of the panel will be aware. The combined authority itself is investing over 50 million in retrofitting for 5,000 homes. But if you look at the number of properties we have across the city region, that's 700,000. So it's just making a small approach to do this. So we need significantly more funding to meet our local ambitions. And the current proposals are targeting social housing rather than the private rented and the privately owned, where probably around about 80% of the housing stock sits. So we also need to think about how do we influence policy and incentivize improvements to energy efficiency in the private and the privately owned and the privately rented sectors. So various barriers out there to doing this, not least funding. The National Housing Federation estimates that £36 billion is needed to bring all housing association homes in the UK up to that minimum EPC rating of C. If you look at the capacity to actually do this, should the money be available, there is an uneven distribution of construction firms across the UK with the capacity to carry out retrofit. So, and part of that is linked to the churn in previous energy policy that's changed, whether it was in vogue or not. So some SMEs are reluctant to invest in this area of work. And there are also supply chain issues as well in terms of moving this forward. And then, of course, that brings us on to skills and how we need to make sure that we have the right skill set and how we can look at the green skills that we want to roll out and embed within the existing workforce. So all of those three barriers, one of the solutions, or in part of the solution, would be how do we get further devolution and how do we enhance the devolution offer we've already got in the city region to try and tackle this. I think one of the, given the age of the properties we've got in the city region, I think retrofitting is one of the solutions, but we really need to look at how we can scale that up, because that's what we need to do. And we've looked at some case studies internationally and nationally, and one that's been mentioned by a number of commentators is some work that Camden Council have been doing. This is with social rented properties, but they've rolled out a retrofit for 33,000. So, it's on a much bigger scale to what we're currently looking to deliver through the combined authorities, £50 million. And Camden have identified 4 areas that have helped them do this, 4 policy areas. First of all, they made sure they had a detailed profile of their existing housing stock so that they could accurately measure costs and potential carbon savings. So they were making the case of why it was important to invest in this. Secondly, they have worked from a procurement perspective with contractors. This is based on the ability of contractors to carry out the necessary work at scale and the provision of local jobs and training opportunities. They've also carried out a full assessment of employment needs early on in the process so that they could then align job opportunities with the potential jobs that were coming through this programme. And they also put in some wraparound governance arrangements to make sure that strong local partnerships in the local area hooked up with the council. So a bit where Bronwen's talking perhaps about aligning the planning more to this as well. So they've tried to really do this as a whole programme across the borough to get that scale. And we've got more information on that programme in our a separate Heseltine Institute policy briefing as well, should people want to have a dig in to that. So not really an answer to the question, a mix of opportunities and challenges I've raised here, and happy to pick up more later on in the discussion.
Thank you so much, Sue, for raising some of those issues, particularly around retrofitting, because we know that to win for the homeowners, the tenants, but also provides training and job opportunities going forward. So thank you, and I look forward to read the report and those briefings. So thanks so much. I'd now like to bring in Paul Kelly, Director, Breaking Ground and Accredited Community-Led Homes Advisor. Over to you, Paul. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, so I just wanted to say a little bit about the community-led housing sector. Breaking Ground was established in 2020 with funding through Power to Change. And it was established to look to support the community-led housing sector develop across the Liverpool City region. So that covers the development of housing co-ops, community land trusts, co-housing schemes and self-build schemes. And I think for us, the kind of concept of community-led housing has got three core principles at their heart. Firstly, that open and meaningful community participation and consent should take place throughout the process. Secondly, that the community-led housing group would own, manage or steward the homes in whichever way they decide to. And thirdly, that whatever housing is developed through the projects is of true benefit to the local community, because we really believe that if we don't create active citizens coming up with their own solutions in their neighbourhoods, we're going to struggle. And that whatever is developed is legally protected in perpetuity for those communities. And this is a growing movement nationally. So Power to Change funded us in the Liverpool City region. Our funding runs out in March, but we're about trying to provide a small but interesting part to the housing diversification agenda across the country and what is on offer. So we're not saying we're the solution. I really have to hold my hands up to that. We're working in partnership with all the other providers, but that this becomes an important catalyst for neighbourhood change at a very local level. And just to give an example, when we started 2.5 years ago, we were working with 17 projects across our region. We're now working with 38. And as we explain to groups the possibilities of community-led housing, more and more coming forward. So we really want to stake our claim for a very small part of the housing offer in our region. And why we want to do this is that because community-led, we believe that investment in housing and bricks and mortar is about people, it's not about buildings. And actually, we think it's really important that, you know, the projects we're working on are delivering homes, in some cases very small scale, but they're having a bigger impact. So let's talk about Home Baked Community Land Trust as an example. People will be aware of Home Baked, it's got quite a profile. They developed it, that community land trust was established 10 years ago. They're currently running one building within which they have developed and supported a really successful home-baked cooperative bakery, an independent organisation that rents its bakery from the community land trust there. And that bakery has become very successful because the community land trust was able to flex how it provided that building and the rent that was provided, that they were able to offer. So the organisation has been able to thrive and currently employs 22 local people in that bakery. Above there's a flat, and attached to the bakery there are 12 derelict houses that the CLT has just gone on site to redevelop into 8 very high-spec retrofit homes for local people, as well as 3 more community business spaces, all affordable and relatable to that community and the income levels within that community. So this is really important. And we want to really diversify the number of these projects happening across our region. There's some interesting developments currently in terms of our context. Joanne Anderson, Councillor Sarah Dorian in Liverpool have really led the way in trying to develop policy to support community-led housing in the region with the community asset transfer policy and the community-led housing policy that they're currently developing. And we're working closely with the combined authority also to look at how that could potentially be rolled out across the other 5 local authority areas. But there are some key things that are a key issue for us. Firstly, we need the government to relaunch the Community Housing Fund. We know we're in a really extraordinary position, and that's really challenging. Michael Gove, before he resigned, was just about to sign off on a 3-year community housing fund deal, and that would have been really important. Obviously, we're in this situation, and that's really challenging. Secondly, we want community-led housing to be recognised in housing strategies across our region, and that is starting to happen. And I think combined with that is we need to look at how we support groups to deliver. Our funding at Breaking Ground is due to run out next March, but groups need the support. And I did want to really acknowledge the financial investment we've had from the registered providers across the Liverpool City region to support us a little bit further after our funding ends in March, because we want to explore how this can be sustainable as a small part of the housing offer. Because we believe that the concept is great, but groups need really intensive hand-holding support from experts to help them to deliver. So we've got to create that context of mutual support to enable those groups to really succeed. So yeah, I'm gonna stop there. We'll have more conversations. Oh, actually, one other thing: pre-feasibility funding is really important. So our groups might get attached to a piece of land or get access to some land, but they need some pump priming support to enable them to draw down other funding from other funders. The combined authority of looking at that, we would love them to put together a pot of money that could be for the community-led housing sector to thrive. I'll be quiet now. But thanks very much.
I think you're muted, Kim.
You're on mute then, Kim. We didn't get any of that. Still can't hear you. No.
Still muted.
I think Kim was probably going to introduce me next as the final panelist. So perhaps I could introduce myself whilst Kim is.
Yeah, we've also
resolving her.
got, so we've got Richard, yourself, and we've got Charlie Whitford as well who'd like to speak. So I've made you a panelist as well, Charlie. So over to you then, Richard.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me today. My name is Richard Weeks. I'm a director of EDAROTH. For those that don't know, EDAROTH is a social and affordable housing developer. The name itself stands for Everybody Deserves a Roof Over Their Head, and that very much describes our ethos and our purpose. We're very much about delivering new social and affordable homes into thriving, inclusive communities. The homes we deliver, we do so using an off-site manufactured housing product that we've developed with the support of our parent company Atkins, which you might know as a design and engineering business. And we use those homes as a vehicle to improve and regenerate the communities in which we work. So I'll start by talking a bit about the quality of homes. Now, there's no shortage of reports in the press around the quality of homes, and we all know it's difficult to deliver housing schemes that are viable, certainly in certain parts of the country. But the solution to that problem can't be to continue delivering poor quality homes. We need to find a way to deliver better quality homes. We need to find a way to deliver those homes more quickly. And for us, that solution is off-site manufacture. We know that the construction sector is struggling to keep up with demand, and we need to tap into manufacturing to meet that shortfall. So the homes that we deliver, as I say, are off-site manufactured, and in doing so, we're able to tap into the capacity that exists outside of construction and in manufacturing. We know that around half of homes delivered by housing associations in the social and affordable sector are delivered through Section 106 agreements over the last year. And so for us, it's really important to look at other ways to deliver homes. Increasingly, those homes don't meet the standards that we'd expect of them, and they don't perform in the way that we would want them to. So it's important that we look at other ways to deliver homes. There's a huge amount of land, of course, in public sector ownership, particularly in housing association ownership, in local authority ownership. And we need to find ways to allow those organisations to self-deliver, not just rely on Section 106. As I said, the construction sector is already really stretched, and so we need to find ways to look outside of that to deliver those homes. So we need to find ways to supplement as well the delivery capability that housing associations and local authorities have themselves. So we would encourage all of those organisations to look to development partners. Businesses like EDAROTH are here with development capability. They're waiting to help. We have a solution to deliver the quantum of homes, but we also have development capability that can supplement that already exists. In terms of viability and funding, again, we know it's very difficult to get schemes to stack up and to secure the right grant funding in the right place. And we talk a lot about levelling up, but actually often we find that the right funding isn't available to the right schemes in the right place. And of course that needs to change. But on the schemes we look at, we always try to look at the broader social value picture. We work in schemes on sites where there's often significant liability associated with that land. And if we look at the sites we work on from a broader social value perspective, then viability starts to look more positive. From our perspective, I think that the key points are we need to look at new ways to deliver homes, and in doing so, deliver better quality, higher performing homes, and tap into the capacity that we need to meet that shortfall. We need to look at different ways to deliver homes that supplement existing majority delivery through Section 106 by taking back control of the land that exists in public sector. And we need to find new ways to make those schemes viable. And certainly EDAROTH, as part of the Atkins and the S&C levelling group, can help with that too. So we have access to group capital, which can help to cash flow and fund some of these schemes too. So a few points there for us to consider, but I think the key message for me is we need to look outside traditional delivery to alternative ways of funding and of delivering new homes.
Thank you, Richard, and I'm sorry that I wasn't able to introduce you. And Paul, thank you for your contribution. I'd like to hand over now to Charlie Whitford. Over to you, Charlie. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, we've spoken to you previously about a proposed sector development programme that has been designed to basically unlock the value of manufacturing in terms of quality and also scalability to support businesses like EDAROTH and many others that deliver both retrofit and new build homes in the region at scale and beyond the region. This included a national centre of excellence, which is proposed to be based in a Liverpool City region. And I just wanted to give you a bit of an update, and thanks for the recommendation for that centre and the programme within the inquiry report last year. I just wanted to give you a bit of an update on where we are with this proposition with government. The Construction Innovation Hub programme that was delivered with government and over 400 industry partners is now complete. That developed a number of key assets, such as the product platform rulebook, which enables supply chain to enter the market in a coordinated approach. It also included the value toolkit, which is a very much a value-based approach for social, environmental, natural and human capital value in the construction sector. That's now been adopted by Treasury and has been referenced in the construction playbook, which is the government procurement guidelines for national infrastructure projects. So that's a few of the examples of the work that's come out of the back of the Construction Innovation Hub 1 phase. We're now in what we're calling a bridge phase, which is looking at how do the tools and how do the partnerships that have been developed through Hub 1, how do we embed and scale that, and what does the next funding round look like with central government? And the proposed Hub 2 at the moment is looking at a combination of two really key elements. One is the programme around housing and scale up and the centre in Liverpool City region, and how that would scale from Liverpool out towards the wider community in Greater Manchester and beyond. That's looking at potentially around about a 50 to £100 million investment at the moment. And a second programme, which would be integrated and aligned with that around industrialized construction. So looking at delivery of schools and hospitals, and how the supply chain and the markets can integrate effectively across these two different these different sectors within construction. So really this does support the ambitions for positive impact, and we don't have any definitive answers from central government, which is obviously quite difficult to achieve at the moment, but this is being widely supported in both BEIS and IPA within Treasury. So hopefully in the next coming months we can have some more positive and definitive news for the group.
Charlie, thank you so much for providing that update to us this morning. Now we're going to have questions and answers to the panel. We've had a lot of different contributions. So the people on the call today, if you have a question to any of the panelists, can you please put your question into the chat box?
Anyone want to speak? Any questions? For Chris, sorry, what was the value model you mentioned? Is it published? That's from Hannah Lyons.
Is that a question to myself, the value toolkit?
Yeah. So it says, what was the value model you mentioned? Is it published?
It is. It's called the value toolkit, and I will dig out while the questions carry on. I'll dig out the link to it online and add it into the chat.
Okay, that's great. Sorry, she said Charlie. Anyone else?
We have a question here from Tim.
Yeah. Hello, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my name's Tim Jago. I actually work at the Combined Authority. So this has been an incredibly helpful discussion, because I sort of drafted the City Region Housing Statement from 2019. Really pleased to see from a number of panels about the need for regeneration of our neighbourhoods where the greatest challenges exist, and we're certainly exploring the role that devolution can play in that. But my question to the panel was around the potential changing role of Homes England in this space. Now, Homes England as a government agency, certainly over the last sort of 5-6 years, has been almost exclusively focused on housing numbers. But we know now, with a new chief executive and a new chair, a focus more on place-based approach, and maybe a greater role for Homes England in regeneration and in placemaking, and potentially around housing quality. And I'd wondered if any of the panel members had picked up on that, or was there an opportunity to make that case to Homes England, given that at this moment in time, that's probably the only sources of funding that we have in this space. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Tim. Bronwen, would you like to answer that question, and maybe any others afterwards would like to come in with their contribution?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, happy to do that. Yes, absolutely. I think Homes England is making a welcome move in the direction of regeneration. Of course, given the political uncertainty, it's very difficult to determine, how that will go. Certainly from the housing organisations that I'm involved in, it's one of the things that we regularly campaign for a recognition that it is not just about new homes. In some cases, it has to be about the replacement of unsuitable homes, properties that were built, for a lifespan of 100 years that have long outlived that. So it is something that we focus on. It is something that is absolutely needed. And I think it's a critical part of a successful regeneration strategy within the city region.
Thanks, Bronwen. Any other panel members want to contribute to that question? Paul? No. Okay, so I know that we've got a question from Stuart Whittingham about regarding social rent. Do you want to ask your question, Stuart? You're on mute.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Kim. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, given the current high inflation rates and the fact that social rents are regulated by the social housing regulator, I'm just wondering what assistance is going to be available to tenants who are going to be hit by double-digit rent rises in the next rent setting process.
Thanks, Joe. I think that might be another one for you, Bronwen. Sorry.
Okay. The current consultation is for the rent increase to be capped, and the proposals at the moment are that it would be capped at either 3%, 5% or 7%. I don't think any landlord would be thinking of imposing double-digit increases, because we're very aware of the impact for our customers. And I think certainly what I tried to set out in the presentation right at the start was the amount of support that we're offering to customers during that time. So the position is still uncertain. We don't expect to get an answer. Well, we were hoping for one with the fiscal statement on the 31st of October. We believe that's been delayed. So we don't have an answer yet. But certainly every landlord I know is well focused on providing as much targeted support as they can to their customers to help them with the cost of living increases, which will come through both fuel and rent and service charges. We're very aware of how difficult that is at the moment.
Thank you, Bronwen. We have a question from Helen Heath for Richard. Helen, would you like to ask your question of Richard, please?
Yes, thanks, Kim. So, Richard, you mentioned in your talk that the need to release land and property that is currently tied up in the public sector and the housing associations. I just wonder if you've got a feel for how big an issue that is, how much potential could be released, and how you'd actually go about doing that as well. What needs to happen for that property to be released? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. No, really good question. And so I should clarify that I didn't necessarily mean that land should be released from ownership. In fact, we very much promote a model where that land remains in public sector or HA ownership. But in terms of the numbers, yeah, we published a white paper a year or so ago that looked at exactly this problem. So the question we're trying to answer is how much publicly owned brownfield land is there? What's the development potential of that land? And looking at the numbers, we have about 1.1, probably upwards of 1.1 million households on the waiting list, which means they're currently sitting in living in unsuitable housing. And our findings were you could almost eradicate that waiting list if you developed all of the developable brownfield land in public sector ownership. So the potential for developing brownfield is enormous. And so the challenge is how do we unlock that land for development? To your point, I don't think the answer is releasing it from ownership or selling it. Actually, commonly that is what happens already. And of course, in doing so, the public sector relinquishes the ability to generate a long-term income from that land. So actually, the model that we would encourage is finding ways to develop that land and maintain ownership of those homes and drive a long-term income. In some cases, that can be done through in-house capability, in-house development capability, but of course that is limited in most cases and can be a limiting factor on the number of homes that are delivered. So again, we would encourage a model of partnership where housing associations, local authorities who do own land, often quite challenging brownfield land, look outside to find appropriate development partners who have the capability from a development perspective to develop that land with them, allow them to maintain ownership of the land and that long-term income stream, but also have the technologies. I spoke a lot about off-site manufacture. Often this land is difficult, and we need to find different, better ways to build, not only to deliver homes that are of better quality and better performing when completed, but are quicker to build, less disruptive to the communities that we build them in. So I think there is huge potential in public sector brownfield land. it doesn't need to be sold, and in fact probably shouldn't be. We should look for ways to keep it in public sector ownership, but to do that we need to find different ways of delivering those homes. If I could just touch on the Homes England point as well, because I think it's worth saying that the change that Homes England made probably over a year ago now around classifying MMCs been really important for the sector. So you may remember that Homes England introduced a threshold for defining MMC and imposed requirements on their strategic partners to deliver a certain proportion, 25% in fact, of their homes using off-site manufactured or MMC solutions, and that change has been really transformational from what we've seen. So for us, I think we very much encourage Homes England to continue down that path of making the use of new technologies that don't rely on traditional construction sector a requirement of accessing quite substantial grant funding through the Affordable Housing Fund.
Thank you so much, Richard. We have a question from Paul, from Hannah Lines. Hannah, would you like to ask your question of Paul, please?
Hello. Sorry, I realised my question was quite broad, wasn't it? I was just really keen to hear a bit more, Paul, what you're up to, because I'm working with Cobalt Housing and John Moores on a community wealth project. So it was a bit more about like how, can you tell me about how you support the community groups with other partners? Do you work with housing associations and majority landlords to get access to land and support?
Yeah, so we kind of take a multifaceted approach actually, and we kind of work with the community group to determine what's the best route for them with their particular context. So there are lots of different models, and for instance in Somerset, the equivalent hub down in Somerset, they solely partner with RPs to provide access to the development of affordable housing in small rural areas, and they're like the bridge between a community and the RPs. Where here, I think we work with a group and then determine what's the best route. So some groups go it alone, some groups are partnering. So Home Baked has been partnering with Your Housing, who've been providing some of that development support. The support I mentioned before, the collective of RPs across the region have provided some support financially to Breaking Ground, and we're looking at where the development aspirations of the RPs might fit in with some community groups across the region, where it's the right fit. So there's a whole range of approaches that we kind of take, and our role is to kind of impartially steer the group across that journey of what might work best for them. And it's not one size fit all. Sometimes people jump on the bandwagon, particularly at the moment, everybody's talking about community land trusts, but they're complex beasts, and they need to fit in with what the context of your local neighbourhood and place is.
Yeah, okay, so a bit of place mapping, asset mapping and so on first. Thank you, really interesting.
Thanks, Hannah and Paul. A question for, another question from Richard, from Louis.
Louis?
No, I didn't have
I think it was just an offer for Tim Jago to get in touch with Richard after the meeting. Yeah. So, and I don't know whether the panelists want to post their details in the chats for people who might want more information from them after this meeting. But we also have a series of questions that have been posted in the chat. If the members who are listening at the moment might want to ask questions of the panel, so feel free to post any questions in the chat. But while people are thinking about doing that, I think we have a question from Chris Bowen. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, thanks, Kim. Chris Bowen from Taurus. Just it's really interesting what we're talking about here today, and I think probably give a bit of a context about where some of us housing associations are in relation to regeneration, place-led initiatives, developments and all that type of stuff. So Bronwen set the scene really that what You know, we've got a backdrop here of things like planning delays, cost rises, contractors going bust. We've had buoyancy in the sales market that's propped things up. That might not continue. We've got to meet net zero targets in the future. The costs are going to rise. And what we want to try and do, and we're really trying to do this in places like North Liverpool, is work out a kind of a place-led collaborative view about what it is that these places need, what's the ambition, and try and channel some of that funding into those places better. And that's part of the discussion with Homes England, because what some places do need is interventions in the housing market. I don't know how some older terraced housing stock are going to be viable if they need £30,000 spent on them to get to net zero standards. I don't think it's going to change demand. It's not going to change values. So it's having that rounded kind of view, I think, about what do places need and trying to tailor funding to that, rather than funding is available to clean up brownfield land, funding is available to subsidise affordable housing, deliver community-led housing. It's trying to get those conversations going with Homes England and the government and combined authorities and so on, that the funding's got to be about what it needs to be to solve the markets and the challenges we've got. So there's a lot of good stuff going on across the city region on that place-led approach. Certainly loads of stuff I know about in Halton, and there's stuff around in Liverpool too, that, and Birkenhead and places like that. So I think that's the position that we're in, is that we need to be place focused and we need to make those better cases there and work together on those things.
Thanks, Chris. Can I ask a question maybe of Sue? Because one of the questions that is in the chat at the moment is about how can housing better support our ageing population, Sue?
Okay, thanks, Kim. I think we very much need to take a strategic approach to looking at this, so that we can enhance the housing and the lifestyle choices for people later on in life. So some of it's about thinking early about how adaptations maybe need to be done in homes, having that wider range of options available to older people as well, and not assuming that everything's about extra care housing. So it is really thinking everything through, increasing different types of houses, whether that's in terms of size, to encourage people to downsize, but having conversations with older people about what is appropriate to them. I think it's how can you align the health and care priorities that you have in a local area with the housing and the planning and the delivery, so you create much more bespoke solutions in local areas. And then alongside that, I think there is still the ongoing activity around energy efficiency and such like that still needs to be done. So there's some short-term and there's some longer-term thinking about this, because often older people only realise about the need to change the house when it's too late, and it's how can we build that in as a normal way of thinking about that housing life cycle.
Thanks for that. I know when I worked for Liverpool Social Services, a lot of people that were looking for bungalows, and bungalows were so sought after, but they very rarely could become available, and having, as you just mentioned, houses that better meet the needs of an ageing population is so important. And I know the time it takes for adaptations to be undertaken on those homes. And it goes back to what Bronwen was saying about 75% of the properties that we have in the city are extremely old, pre-war in 1919. So an awful lot of finances needed to bring them up to a standard that better meets the needs of people, whether they are elderly or have a disability. So I think Debbie is asking a question about how we can tackle homelessness and find routes into affordable housing. Who would like to answer that question? Sorry, Bronwen, a lot of these questions seem to be kind of focused on your area of expertise. Yeah. I'm sorry to put you on the spot again.
That is no problem. That's a question that I spend a lot of time thinking about. So just in terms of, if we pick up the homelessness point, the challenge that we have in this city region and in this country is we simply don't have enough suitable housing for the people who need to live in it. So it almost kind of, you know, it's back to basics. It's subsidised housing for people who cannot afford to meet their own housing needs at the market, and subsidised housing needs subsidy. So we are often simply talking about, you know, we need more of this, and in our current environment and the current political situation we're facing, that feels a challenge. That said, I think we do have to look at the use of our existing stock, and doing what we can do in order to, we talked about, you know, people in homes that are no longer suitable for them, and encouraging them to move into homes that may be more suitable. I think there are some of the things that we've been doing. For example, we've done some work on converting small 2-bedroom terraces into 1-bedroom homes, and they have proved very successful indeed in accommodating people. We tend to forget the bedroom tax. You know, it's still there. It's still a challenge. Actually, we could have more flexibility with our stock and the way that we let, if we didn't have the penalty that people pay when they're apparently under occupying homes. So I think that there are things that can be done with our existing homes. There are things that we can do with technology that enable people to stay in their homes for longer. So there are lots of things that we can, and indeed are, you know, very focused on doing. But I'm afraid that doesn't take us away from the really pressing question that we simply don't have enough homes for the people who need to live in them.
Thanks, Bronwen. Does any other panelists want to contribute to that question? Go on, Paul, thank you.
Yeah, one of the things we're interested in is looking at, there's a couple of interesting organisations in the north, Gyroscope in Hull and Canopy in Leeds, that are kind of community-led organisations that have of long standing, that have taken over old empty properties in both Hull and Leeds. And through a whole process of engaging homeless people and skills development, have put those homes back into use. But then they're providing support to enable people to maintain and sustain tenancies within. So they've almost become very small scale housing providers at the same time, and have been going a long time. And I'm quite surprised that we haven't got something like this in our region, but I think there's a real potential to develop something like this. So it's something we've started to look at and want to try and move forward in the next sort of 12 months or so.
Thanks for sharing that, Paul. It sounds like a really interesting project, because I know the homelessness in the city is reaching a point where we are sending people outside of our city at the moment, you know, and that is a sad state of affairs. And I raised a question in Parliament last week about the need of support for women fleeing domestic violence, because that tends to be one of the highest percentage of people requiring homes after fleeing domestic violence. So I think it's a big issue in the city and the region that really needs to be looked at. So we have no other questions in the chat, but there are questions that have been posted in the chat box in terms of broader questions that maybe panelists might want to think about answering. And I think Debbie's put one in about what can be done to regenerate our neighbourhoods and create healthy places. Richard, do you want to answer that one? Is that in your area of expertise?
Yeah, I can talk a bit about this. So we look at a number of sites that are embedded within existing communities. So a lot of the land we look at is infill in nature. It's scattered through those communities, and in many cases that land is a blight on the community and can attract, you know, significant cost in terms of maintaining and policing the land and so on. So at a simplest level, the delivery of new homes can in itself regenerate areas of communities and improve those communities. So the first scheme, for example, that we delivered as EDAROTH was in South London. It was on an existing garage site that was used primarily for fly tipping. Actually attracted antisocial behaviour, drug use, pretty much everything other than parking vehicles, and that's not uncommon. You know, there are lots of sites across the UK exactly like that, and it was interesting that the council in that area had estimated that small plot was costing them somewhere in the region of £70,000 a year to maintain, to police, to survey and inspect, to make sure it's broadly safe. And we were able to deliver new homes on that site, which were of much higher quality than any of the surrounding homes, but to do so in a way that enhanced the community around it. And it was really interesting that we faced very little resistance from the residents who actually lived within that estate. And in fact, they were very supportive of what we were doing. I was assisted by the fact that we were delivering homes using an off-site manufactured product that was far less disruptive to them during delivery. But it did exemplify how you can use housing as a vehicle to improve existing communities, and do so in a way that brings the local residents or that community on the journey with you and easily finds their support. So yeah, I think there's a point there really about the appropriate selection of land. There's a point about properly engaging with residents and understanding the problems that they face, and understanding and addressing those in the schemes that we deliver. You know, we very deliberately don't talk about units. It's very common, isn't it, in the industry? People talk about numbers of units, but we talk about homes and people, and that's at the heart of all our schemes. If we're not delivering schemes for the people that will live in them and the people that will live near and around them, then we're doing the wrong thing.
Thanks, Richard. And I think, from my point of view, when we're looking at housing development, particularly on scale, we need to be thinking about having the infrastructure in place to support those homes, particularly, increasing both schools, health centres, because often that appears to me, don't know whether it is, to be an afterthought. And we're already in the city, particularly in Liverpool, struggling in terms of places and schools. So those kind of things, from my point of view, are also very important. We have a question, comment from Jill Morris that I'd like to read out to the panel. It says, we need to ensure that housing remains affordable in both the social and private rented sector. The current economic climate makes it difficult to see how we can build better, higher quality and healthier, greener housing. The rising cost of rents and mortgages and heating is going to impact on a lot of people. Anybody want to comment on that? On Bronwen, thank you so much.
Going to comment on that, Kim, but also on the previous point that you made about infrastructure. And one of the points that Richard made was about the number of homes that come into social housing as a consequence of the Section 106 infrastructure levy. And the current changes that are proposed to the infrastructure levy mean that that is deliberately now intended to be for the things that you quite rightly point out are needed, like doctors' surgeries and and schools and all of the rest of it. But I think the consequence of that will mean that very little will be delivered in affordable housing. And I think that is another kind of thing to just be aware of, that one of the key sources of new housing is for affordable housing is likely to be reduced. And I think, Jill kind of summarises what feels like a perfect storm. And whilst I don't want to be too gloomy in all of the conversation, I don't think I can stress enough just how big the challenge is to social and affordable housing at the moment, and the scale of the consequences that are likely to come out of proposed rent cuts. If we do end up losing, if we do end up losing the affordable housing funding, you know, these are times that certainly are more challenging than anything that I've ever seen in my professional career. And you know, much as all of us are going to make every effort that we can to address some of the very, very difficult circumstances that our customers are going to face in the coming year, I think we shouldn't understate the scale of the challenge.
Thank you so much, Bronwen, and also recognising that because of interest rises, the impact on people being able to afford their mortgages, you know, that could result in people becoming homeless and requiring support from social landlords and the private rented sector, of course. And you know, it's about keeping an eye on some of those things, isn't it? So we've got no more questions in the chat box. I just wanted to know if any of the panelists, sorry, Richard, you had a question, your hand up? Was that a legacy hand?
Yeah, no, it wasn't actually. I just wanted to add to the question from Jill about delivering better quality, better performing homes, and how we do that within the existing climate. And I think you know, the answer for me is very straightforward, which is that homes increasingly become more sophisticated. We ask more of the homes that we deliver. We ask them to perform better, and so we need to be more sophisticated with how we deliver those homes, and continuing to deliver homes in a very traditional, bespoke, one-off on a building site sort of fashion isn't going to easily get us to that point. You'll see a lot of stories in the press around the cost of achieving net zero, for example, but that cost uplift only really exists because it's not compatible or easily compatible with traditional construction techniques. We need to move to seeing homes as more sophisticated, precision-made things. Hence the manufacturing approach is really better suited. And what we find actually is that we can deliver net zero homes sort of out of the box effectively, far more easily than you could traditionally, and that comes very simply from the fact that we're making things in a controlled environment where you can control workmanship in a way that you simply can't, with the best will in the world. You simply can't do that on a building site. And it's interesting that we've observed, you know, in real terms as well on the homes we've delivered, that they're actually seeing a positive performance gap. The homes perform better than we thought we expected them to. The complete opposite of what you see in traditional build. Pretty much across the board, traditionally delivered homes don't perform as well as you'd expect them to. But we see the opposite. We see precision-made homes doing exactly what you expect them to do, which is to perform better even than you'd hoped. And you can do that by better workmanship in controlled environments. So as I say, for me, the answer to that one is fairly simple, which is that we don't need to see the solution to this problem as throwing more money at housing delivery. We just need to find better ways of doing it.
Thank you, Richard. Charlie?
Thanks. Just to follow on from that, really, I come from the construction sector, so I don't talking negatively about it. Perhaps I'm allowed to, but the levels of productivity in housing delivery and construction sector more generally are so low compared with other sectors that that's a positive thing. There are massive gains to be had. The level of waste is phenomenal and wouldn't be tolerated in other sectors. So again, there are massive gains to be had. And Richard's points about off-site and manufacturing homes within factories is absolutely valid. But I would extend that. Modern manufacturing approaches go beyond factories making houses. They look at the supply chain coordination. They look at the procurement frameworks, and I refer back to the value toolkit and common platforms of quality assurance. And there's a whole quiver of different elements that are being addressed, and those will enable productivity to increase and waste to reduce. But really key is, and going back to like the automotive sector here, is not to have single vertically integrated systems where you have a local authority working with an off-site manufacturer as an example, and an integrated supply chain delivering that solution. Because what that will do is that will create land value uplift, and it doesn't, and sometimes it provides economies of scale in those particular projects, but what that doesn't do is embed lasting value into the system. What we need to have is a coordinated approach across the supply chain and across the market. And we've seen that in automotive with shared approaches of quality assurance and other frameworks that go across competitive OEMs. But the key thing for this is that it unlocks value for the customer. And that's what we're all here talking about, is how do you create better quality, affordable homes? That's value for the customer, not value for the property developer. And we need a coordinated approach across the markets, both private sector, social housing, private rent, private owned, self-build. The whole system needs to be coordinated. And to do that, we need to invest up front in the system. So that would be my addition to that.
Thank you so much for that contribution, Charlie. And if there are no further comments that anybody would like to make or any questions, then it just gives me the opportunity to thank everybody for attending the meeting today, and thank our panelists, Bronwen, Joe, Sue, Paul, Richard and Charlie for their contributions. And while things are not looking good, there's some positive things happening. It'd be good for Sue or the Secretariat to send out information about the report that Sue mentioned and the briefing. It'd be good to have an update on the combined authorities 50 million project on retrofitting the 5,000 house, just to see how's that going. And just to say that as a local MP, and all of the MPs that have been on the call today, or the MPs for the city region, it's advocating on the behalf of the city region in terms of funding and improving the housing stock for people in our city region. So without further ado, I'd just like to say thank you to the Secretariat and everybody for joining, and look forward to seeing you at our next meeting. So take care, enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and goodbye.